Welcome back to the war to liberate Italy and the rest of the world from syndicalism. Yes, we're playing Kaiserreich. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And Arno wanted to see, as we were ending, any naval battle reports, which we have. Looks like one here. Well, we lost an aircraft going after some merchant vessels. That looks about like the only real conclusion. We're still sort of... No, well, we're not really getting much out of those. You know, what we need to do here is bring up some of our naval bombers that are supposed to be operating out there, and let's move them to here. That'll give them better coverage. Let's move you up to here and move your operations to the north instead. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I gotta try and see what works. That's definite. Well, maybe. I don't know how much we're gonna do a train focus thing. I don't know if you've told IKB about your new rail job there, Lum. You told us, but when we were playing War Thunder, but I don't think he was around at the time. Yeah, I would like to talk to you, Azads, on Discord sometime, and whether we set it up as a debate over British colonial policy, which would be good. And I don't want to just make everything confrontational, but that could be good. Or just talk about modern geopolitics in, you know, the greater Indian Ocean region, things like that. Again, I don't want to always make it like a confrontation thing, but sometimes, you know, talking about things in a, and I don't want to make it, make it as a, a heated confrontation. Oh, you suck because you don't, support or one side or the other. No, but just on the merits, debate the merits of British imperial policy or some such thing. That could be fun. So yeah, I would like to do some of that stuff. So we can keep all that in mind. And again, nothing's going to be decided today, but, and I do very much agree, we got to try things and see how they work. But part of that is what to try first. Just simply on that sort of a basis. And you on YouTube who are watching, yeah, I get that. Modern geopolitics, colonialism. Yep, I can understand, Azats. I can understand. You watching on YouTube can post below what you might like to see from a Q&A. And part of the idea, and we really could make some stuff that is talked about, not go onto Discord, make an episode that is not live and then post it onto YouTube, or it could be a thing in which we do it live, well, maybe even on YouTube as well, but with the idea of taking questions from the audience as well as from either me talking alone to you or talking with somebody else. Okay, you've been approached by Alpha Venezuelan military. Well, I think we're going to have to say no to this because we need our weapons desperately. Okay. Kingdom of Spain wants to sign that pact of non-aggression. Okay. We'll do that. Because, you know, you need to have people that can understand multiple points of view to talk about things. And partly, you know, I guess a good example of that would be, you know, right, I guess sort of coming to mind in thinking of AZADs and others, what's happening in Hong Kong right now. But Hong Kongers, or Hong Kong Chinese, or however you want to say that, definitely have their feet in two worlds, in the Western world and the Chinese world. I think some of them are rather westernized in Hong Kong growing up there. Some of them are just only lightly westernized. But that, and part of that, of course, is the ability to speak English for what I'm talking about doing, but also the ability to speak English. And if you have access in the modern world with the internet, you sort of know what's going on outside of your environment. Where if we were talking from somebody who is, you know, internal to China in this modern day, even if they spoke English to a, you know, a reasonable amount, I don't know how easily that they can talk about the differences between, say, Chinese viewpoints and Western viewpoints. Is that I don't know how well they would understand. You know, a lot of people, or most people, you know, presume that the person they're talking to sort of understands them and their world and their viewpoint. And so you have to have knowledge of sort of multiple things, you know. It was somewhere in some remote areas up in this part of the world, people, when early on, I'm talking like in the 1960s or 70s or whatever, they had real problems identifying people from photographs because they weren't used to like looking at people in a two-dimensional image or something, from what I understand, and it's probably butchering it, but they just weren't used to doing that. And so, you know, there's just sort of presumptions of capabilities, so, and presumptions of understanding things. So I hope you understand how I'm doing this. So talking to you know, someone who understands at least some elements of the Western world can really help explain other parts of the world and other views. Where, you know, I guess another sort of modern day extreme, fairly extreme example, or, you know, I'm not talking necessarily about the people living in Kabul, but the people living in remote parts of Afghanistan. Sure, they've experienced the Western world in contact with Soviet soldiers or contact with, you know, American or other, you know, British or other occupation soldiers. And even that's still very limited and still probably a very you know, they don't understand each other well. So these are very isolated people. And so they would just presume that we know so much about their daily world when they try to explain it and their viewpoints on it. So you need somebody, you know, some people that can really sort of understand and then sort of understand some of the differences. And I really want to bring on and explain more of the non-Western world to the West, if you will. As you guys know, I'm very much a promoter of Western values, shall we say, and a, you know, very, if you will, chauvinistic and pro-Western values. But I still want to understand other systems and other values. So explaining what is going on in India in a modern sense, like AZADs could probably do really well, would be a very valuable thing. And I don't know how wide of an audience it might get. It might actually, if we do this well, might get a very wide audience eventually, wider than just my gaming. But it would be, you know, because we can talk about whether it's, you know, certain law enforcement actions that recently happened in India, or the current immigration policy debates in India, trying to get not so much corrections about it, because I don't know that everybody's wrong on their criticisms, but get the viewpoint from sort of the Indian viewpoint out to the rest of the world, and better. Okay, let me somehow spelled it out. So more so like a podcast than a Q&A. Yeah, well, and I don't know how it would end up being, and there might be, how about glorious armored forces in Norway during World War II? How many snow scooters is that? Yeah. So, and I don't know, because now, Q&A, I don't want to do things so much of, hey gamer, what's your favorite color or something like that, because once you sort of answer those questions, well then, you've answered them and no more interesting thing. But I think part of the idea of a Q&A, as I see it, is the interaction between me or a group of us and the viewers. So we could definitely do a podcast, most assuredly, if you will, and then present it. But I also think, and I don't know what is the best format, whether it would be best just to have a series of points to talk about, to cover in in half an hour or an hour with someone and go over those and then present that, or whether to present some of that and then see if people are having questions based on that. I don't think I specifically have a favorite color. I could probably name a color that wouldn't that that might be highly liked by me, but yeah, things like Arno's asking are very topical. Do I think there's going to be a war with Iran versus the U.S. after the latest provocation? Okay. Do I think? Yes, no. It's not yes and no, but it's yes, no. I thought we were at war with Iran. Can someone please and correct me if I'm wrong? But isn't the general, and I mean now or later on YouTube, isn't the general historical diplomatic understanding is that if you do not have diplomatic relations with a country, you are may not be declared, but you're functionally at war with them. Now, you may have a country that is, out here at some time, that Britain doesn't have diplomatic relations to because they just freaking can't find each other. They don't know about each other. I'm talking sort of historically kind of sense. So when the Iranian Revolutionary Republic, or whatever it's technically called in English, stormed and took over our embassy, isn't that an act of war, people? And hasn't their actions, including bombing the, supporting my understanding, the bombing of the Marine barracks, as well as the embassy in Lebanon back in the 80s, all been acts of war against us? It's not like, oh, well, they threw out our diplomats. I don't know. Let's just say if Bhutan wants to kick all diplomats out of the country because we want to be completely isolationist, which they sort of have been at times in the past, or Tibet was sort of that way in the past. We just don't even want to have diplomatic relations with you. If you you can come and talk to our border guards and send us a letter if you really want to talk to us. That's a little different. And then do no violent acts against anybody and do not support anybody else. That might not necessarily be an act of war. But yeah, I see a history of, including once we were occupying Iraq, many acts of war, but you could say that, oh, they're just supporting factions. Now, I'm talking about acts of war against the United States ever since taking over our embassy. So I think we're in a state of war with Iran right now. No, the U.S. has not declared war against Iran, as in a formal Senate declaration of war. But the mere fact, I say, and because the leaders of the country have multiple times publicly said death to America. Now, you can say death to America and not mean it, especially if you have a U.S. embassy and in your country, and your foreign minister talks to that embassy, and I'm not talking about the sort of status of the UN, because that's a little different, having people there because they're representing to the UN and not to the U.S. government. And we allow that. But if they have an embassy to Washington, D.C. and an ambassador, and their leader says death to America, well, that's just speechifying maybe. But we see this lack of diplomatic recognition back and forth with each other's government, and they're saying death to America. So yeah, I sort of say we're already at freaking war with them. So yeah, we're at war with them. Or they're at war with us, or whatever you want to call it. That's an absolute thing, I believe. Do I think we're going to put, army divisions into Iran? Hell no. I don't think Trump's ever going to do that. Trump may bomb the hell out of the place, may blockade it with ships, may have sort of a functional war, but Trump is not the type of U.S. leader to want to enter a war. He is anti-interventionism. And I know this is supposed to be Kaiserreich, but you sort of got me onto this, Arno, and it's your fault. We've deployed a bunch more U.S. Marines to Kuwait down here as a rapid response force to defend the U.S. Embassy compound area in Baghdad, because we've trained and tried to support up the Baghdad military forces, and they won't fight or defend the place for whatever reasons, and there's maybe multiple reasons, but they won't do that. And I understand that the Iranian or the Iraqi parliament is discussing whether they want to request, order, whatever, the U.S. forces leave Iraq over some of the latest stuff. And they may do that. Now and I think if they formally say we should go, we should leave. So they should be very, very careful whether they want to, because they may just want to think that they'll vote and we'll stay there because they want to have it on record saying that, oh, well, we asked them to leave, but they didn't. So they want the benefits of us being there with the benefits of nationalism, shall we say, and saying go home. And that's fine, and we may leave, but that doesn't mean that we remove our military, Marine security type, maybe a few thousand soldiers defending the embassy there. We very well may defend the embassy there, but withdraw other military assets from Iraq. And so we very well may do that. And Trump may go along with that. And so I don't see Trump. I mean, everyone wants to call him a warmonger. That's just because they'll call him anything they think they can do to call him and hurt him. again, the nutty left. Their Trump derangement syndrome is real. So Trump won't do that. But if Iran does a lot of bad things, Trump will retaliate. Trump will put ships out here and capture or sink anything that Iran moves. Whether it's military ships, their submarines, their surface vessels, whatever. I would say Trump is very willing to fight in naval and air battles against Iran, but he does not want to occupy them. So I don't think the U.S. is going to put large numbers of soldiers into there. We have Kuwait, and it's not just being grateful for the U.S. liberating Kuwait. They are, I do believe, but they also realize in the geopolitical world here, they'll either get swallowed up by Saudi Arabia, by whatever forces in South Iraq or Iran. Kuwait is going to rely upon the U.S. as a protection force for its existence. So they're going to always be very friendly to the U.S., like they were very friendly to Britain before. And so they're going to always want U.S. occupation forces there because we don't mess with their internal policies, and their internal policies are not the most odious in the region. They're, I do believe, less odious than Saudi Arabia's policies. So, yeah, I'm not saying there are some bright Western country that's purely democratic and equal rights for men and women and gay people can marry and all that kind of stuff. No, I'm not saying that at all, but they're not the most odious in the region, especially compared to somebody like Iran, but also Saudi Arabia. So yeah, I see that as being our sort of little friendly little piece of the pie and they want us to be there because like we don't need to change them much, and so they don't feel the negativity of us being there and see the positives. So I could see Trump really sort of engaging, but hell, Saudi Arabia is already fighting Iran proxies here, and so there's other proxies that we could prop up to do the ground fighting. Suppose kind of Iran, so some of us talk about some broad subjects or something like that. I'm going to catch up to there, and then we're going to play some more kind of sort of what kind of thing's going to happen. Nuke throwing kind of, or I'll kill you no matter what kind. Well, nuke throwing. See, this is one thing that, because, like I said, I believe Iran is at a state of war functionally with the West, particularly the U.S. And if they were to really get nukes, I think at some point, in some fashion, they would use them. Whether try to disguise it as a terrorist attacks, or because they did that sort of what I understanding, but I'm still not. It's still murky of the attack on the Saudi Arabian oil production capabilities. Obviously, that wasn't nukes, but I'm still not sure exactly what attack how that happened. But I know there's some people still talking false flags from Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia's already been doing enough stuff, and it could easily do a false flag type attack that doesn't have as devastating effects to Saudi Arabia. So I'm not buying that, but I don't quite understand what happened there. But I could easily see Iran trying to smuggle in some nukes either into Saudi Arabia or into Israel. Sure, they'd try, but I think that doesn't have as good a return on it as nuking somewhere in the West. Sending a ship to Rotterdam, or sending a cargo container to Rotterdam that happens to have a nuke in it that goes up. That I could see as a very real thing. Hello, Caster Cress Mason. Good to have you here. I'll get to the draft. Yeah, I would prefer no nukes, but I don't think we should allow Iran to have nuclear missiles. I don't know that you need to go to, I don't think you need to nuke Iran to stop them from having nuclear missiles, but I think we should stop them from having nuclear missiles or nuclear bombs, generally speaking, which is a slightly different thing. But I think that should stop. I don't know that we need to put boots on the ground to do so. Go to boots on the ground, the drafting thing. Oh, that's again Trump derangement syndrome. The U.S. Army doesn't want a lot of troops. They don't want the draft. Why would we draft? That's just getting people to go, oh my God, there's going to be a war. Let's see if we can get the fear of the draft up to get people not to support Trump. I mean, that's just all it is. It's just hysteria. It's anti-Trump hysteria. There was a couple of days after the attack on the embassy in Baghdad and before the Soleimani airstrike, they should have hearings. Why aren't there calls for hearings about Trump and his attack on his embassy? No one was calling for hearings because there was the Benghazi attack on the Benghazi. Benghazi's over here. Consulate. No one was calling for hearings because the consulate was attacked. They were calling for hearings because did the government not send aid to support the consulate when they could have sent aid to support the consulate? If they could have. Did they choose not to? That's what was the hearings about, primarily. Well, Trump did send aid support when the things happened, and then he struck Soleimani because of that attack. So, they want to, if Trump does nothing, they want to blame Trump. If Trump does something, they want to blame Trump. No matter what Trump does or not do anything, they want to blame Trump. I'm not saying Trump is right in any of these goddamn actions. I don't know. I don't have enough information. But they just want to blame Trump for existing. And so that makes me and millions of other American people get behind Trump, and they don't realize that. So if it was, yes, Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia. Yeah, yes, we know that. Okay. Just still reading through the thing. Yes, that's sort of why I picked it, but I also know Rotterdam is a massive transshipment port, so that somehow in the supply chain, they get a cargo container, swap out where it's supposedly from, they'll make it out like it's from India or something like that, and that it's going to be, go into an international sort of trade zone in Rotterdam, so it isn't actually entering the Netherlands technically, so it's not checked for what's in it, because it's going to be transshipped onto some other location, and while it's waiting there, it goes boom. That's sort of why I picked it, because I know one of you live near there, plus it is one of the major ports for transshipping. 50% of U.S. troops in Iraq were mercenaries. The draft is... Yes, and so the draft is unnecessary. The U.S. doesn't want or need mass armies anymore. It's just not a thing that we need. And if there was a major action and there was a real call for volunteers, there's plenty of Americans that would volunteer. So, yeah, it's just a fantasy of the anti-Trump derangement syndrome people. It's real. Trump derangement syndrome is real. I don't care what other people say. I know it's real. Again, I'm not saying Trump is right in everything or what Trump is doing is the best. So whether you hear now or you later on YouTube, yeah, you can have your opinions about all the different things that should or shouldn't be done. And I'm not saying, you can jump on me for, oh, but you support. No, not necessarily. It's just when you come up with so much nonsense, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, let's continue with Kaiserreich here. Oh, he's wounded now. Well, yeah, I'll call you Castor. Yeah, Caster. I generally like what the government is doing, and we could maybe separate out the government from Trump personally. Oh, well, you look like you could march down into there. And you can attack there, you can attack there. You attack down out of the mountains. There's some horses as well. And so the government's generally what I like, especially domestically and also trade-wise, the government is doing under Trump. What the people with Trump derangement syndrome, because I know it's partially disease, is I really think Trump is an old-style New York Democrat. I think that's his core values. Had Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer embraced Trump, said Trump was wonderful, they would have gotten so much out of him. It would have been like they had another Democratic president, I think, or another Bill Clinton, because he would have done deals with them and pissed off the hardline Republicans, but the squishy Republicans would have supported him, and the Democrats would have supported him, and he would have been a rhino president. But because they went crazy, because he gets elected, his only base of support is the hard conservatives, so he has to go that. Well, if you're talking about a nuke going off in Rotterdam, how? The Dutch don't even have a navy, let alone nuclear weapons. How are you going to respond in kind? Do you have an air force that can strike Iran, Arno? I seem to recall something about a Russian shooting down a Dutch plane, and I didn't see much. You know, I didn't see even really. I remember that there was some sort of public maybe stopping buying Russian products, but has there even been a Dutch declaration that no importation or exportation of exporting of products from the Netherlands to Russia over that incident? No. So no, you wouldn't. You can nuke Rotterdam. Nah, the Dutch will do nothing. NATO? NATO do something? What would NATO do? What would NATO do? Please explain. I would like to know. What would NATO do to Iran? What would NATO do? How would it get there? And if by you're saying NATO, the US, well, no, we can't spare any arms. I don't see a whole lot of NATO support for dealing with the Russians over the Dutch shooting down the airplane. You know, like NATO doing economic warfare against Russia. That would have shut Russia down, would have collapsed Putin's regime. Oh, sure, they might not have any natural gas or anything, but still they could have shut down Putin's regime. When Iran takes British tankers hostage because Britain helps try to stop arms shipments to Syria, and then the Iranians promise, no, those shipments aren't going to Syria. We promise that. And when Britain lets them go, they go to Syria anyways. They do. The shipments that Iran, that Britain stops for a while, they go to Syria anyway. So, and they do nothing about that because they're too afraid. NATO's too afraid that Iran will stop some of its ships going through the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah, are you going to capture our nukes? No, it wouldn't lead to World War III. Oh, well, yeah, legally, like our treaty that the U.S. government, I think under Bill Clinton, signs a treaty with the let's see, kingdom here, but with the Republic of Ukraine, stating that if Ukraine gives up its nuclear weapons that are stationed there, that the Soviet Union had stationed there, that the Ukrainian government had full control over. I don't know if they had all the launch codes or whatnot, but they had the missiles themselves. I'm sure they could have figured something out. The nukes that they had, that if they would give up those nukes, the U.S. would have a treaty to protect the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And then the Soviet Union takes over Crimea and Obama does nothing. Yeah! How about that treaty that the U.S. will come to Ukraine's aid to protect it if its territorial integrity is taken, or the battles that are happening out here right now? Yeah, how's that working out for Ukraine? If they hadn't given them their nukes, Russia would not have taken Crimea. So, it's, so this is why, yeah, a lot of BS in my opinion. Okay, you come down to here. You come to here. You come to here. You support this attack. And you push to there. Try to outflank them. Okay, you attack there to help pin those troops. You attack there to pin those troops.
Bereit zum Ausrücken. Ausrücken.
So, yeah, I'm not buying that NATO has the will to do anything serious. And even if somebody wants to argue they have the will but just not the capabilities, maybe, but I don't see them overly hard working to re-get capabilities anymore. Well, you're right, Azads. I don't know that anybody seriously in the West is all that concerned about Ukraine. Okay, we want to do something other than rifles. We have a massive deficit in rifles. Seeing that, what we're going to do here is we're going to cancel a bunch of these divisions here. I know we need more divisions, but we also need rifles. So we do that. That should lessen our deficit. There, we also need artillery. I'm not so worried about lack of anti-air, so let's increase our artillery production. And yes, it's about power. Power is most assuredly at the core of a lot of international law, and the ability to enforce the laws are all there. I'm not sure on that, Azaz. I don't know what kind of control they had. I thought they had control of the facilities. Meaning their people parked on the facilities. I don't, like I say, I don't know that they had the launch codes, but given time, I would expect them to be able to set up their own launch procedures and in practice take them over their ability to operate them. Nemo me impugn last set. And I'm sure I'm butchering the Latin. Basically is you can't strike at me with impunity. So generally speaking, yes. I agree that Soleimani was the primary person who was directing anti-American activities for the last 10 plus years. And he should have been taken. The British wanted to take him out like in 2007, and the US said no. Or was that 2008? I forget. And there's been other times that they could have been taken out, very readily taken out. And because of timidity on the parts of the political leaders, they didn't. And I think that because of his, you can see in the boldness of his actions, he thought he was not going to be anything was going to happen to him. So that shows them, generally speaking, though, and the them is those who would readily take such actions, that there's going to be consequences. So it's not going to, people are worried, the current Ayatollah was saying, well, there's going to be, there's going to be devastating actions taken, he's saying, against the U.S. And my response to some of those on Twitter have been, you guys can follow me over on Twitter if you want to hear some of my thoughts on there. Unlike his usual death to America rants, yeah, I think there's going to be a renewed effort at some point to strike at American forces or American interests. May not be forces, it may be interests. Yes. But I think there was going to be striking at American interests anyways. It may just up the priority of some attacks a bit, of getting them launched, but it will also mean that they know that there's going to be a real consequence, quite possibly personally, for any attacks. And so they know this. And we saw, I think, the situation, and I think it's quite real, where a U.S. drone, which is, an unmanned airplane. These aren't these little, small droney things. These are big airplanes that are expensive, that was shot down by Iran in what we and the general international community consider international airspace. At least this is my understanding of it. It wasn't flying over Tehran. It wasn't flying over Bandar Abbas. It was flying out here somewhere. I think it was somewhere out at sea, I believe. I may be wrong about some of the details. Sorry if I am. But it was what we would consider international airspace. But very much maybe in airspace that Iran claims. Okay, there could be a disputed. So maybe disputed airspace. They shot down a drone. The U.S. military, not just because of the expense of it, but once we let them shoot down a drone, they'll keep shooting down drones. Just because they can. wanted to do a strike against some radar facilities or missile facilities down here in the Bandar Abbas area, quite possibly the actual facilities that launched the attack. Well, for various reasons, and not just humanitarian, but the loss of life was enough that Trump, after initially sort of giving the go-ahead, decides to stop that. So I think that sent a message to Tehran that Trump doesn't have the will to strike, just talks big. Okay, well, now you've attacked sovereign American soil. An embassy is considered sovereign American soil. Now that you've attacked there, and yes, there was a loss of life of a contractor, I guess a security guard type thing in Kirkuk or someplace like that, but no loss of life. But storming American soil in the embassy, and if you look at the pictures, they weren't just a bunch of protesters with signs and a few guys with rocks. They were paramilitary types that may have left their AKs at home, but it was a serious style assault like they did to the Tehran embassy. Again, you have to look at the parallels with Iran and that, storming the embassy. Tehran would love to get because Sadr City is over in this part of Baghdad, and Sadr City is very, very pro-Iran because they're the Shiites that are up here. The big geographical area of Shiites is in the south, and then it's Sadr City up here. They would love to get a big Sadr City contingent occupying the U.S. Embassy. That's in the playbook of Tehran. They like to strike at our embassies, like they strike with the car bomb at the Beirut embassy. They may have done other stuff. I'm not sure if the Khobar Towers was more of a Al-Qaeda thing or more of a Tehran thing or both. I'm just not sure right offhand. But they like striking at those things. And so they struck at our embassy using Iraqi surrogates. And so Trump realizes all this and realizes nemo me impune lacet. You cannot strike at me with impunity. He may even know that Latin quote because of his family history. And so he struck back, and it told them, yes, you can strike at us, yes, you can do damage to us, but we're going to strike back at you. And so that has put them on warning, and then the strike against some of the other leaders of some of the Baghdad area pro-Iran militias were struck now again. So that's putting them all on notice that we will strike. We may not bring down your militia. We may not bring down your power base. We may not destroy you. But it's going to have a real cost for you to do violent actions against the U.S. Think before you do that. And so that, I think, is the message. The joke is just like the UN, if you really want to take charge of Europe, needs to set up. Yeah, NATO is becoming a joke. I don't think Europe is done yet, Azads. I'm not disagreeing with your facts and figures. I think Europe is in an awakening of its situation and is going to course correct. So yeah, I think we're going to see a course correction there. We are running out of militia units. Let's grab these two to cover our ports and our rear areas here that may spring up as need for better occupation. You go out and take these islands. Can you go take these islands? No? Is there an enemy navy? Okay, well... Okay, we sunk a convoy with our air power, so it's doing well. We sunk a cruiser out here with our air power. See why I like for non-naval powers, I mean also naval powers too, just to back up ships. Okay, well we lost a submarine and 2 aircraft, but we sunk a British destroyer and 5 Greek convoys here in the battle, along with a bunch of other people, though we were the major component, both air and submarine. Okay, IKB, thanks for being here. Yeah, it is getting late. Well, we've got a lot of teenagers in the West, and they all know how to play CSGO, and we just got to build little drones for them to operate to, not flying, well, flying drones maybe, but also drone, not autonomous vehicles, but human-operated attack robot type vehicles. So it's not Terminator's AI; it's humans guiding them, and so we can have all of our teenagers play CS:GO against the rest of the world. Oh, we are out of fuel. Okay. We're getting a lot of. Okay, well, let's up our. Fuel from Romania. Okay, that's better. Okay, daily gain going up, going down to 60. Don't know why we're going up and down. Daily gain. Current consumption is more. Who do we want to try to get more fuel from? Well, America. Can we do some trading with America? No, we don't want to do that much. Okay, Zad, it's good having you here. Ace pilot promoted. Come on, we need more fuel. We have some coming in, we have more going out. We have a fair amount of... Let's... Trying to diversify our source of fuel supply.
Zuhören! Befehle?
Okay, well, they've covered their
Befehle!
forces. Let's
Ihre Befehle?
oh, there is somebody out here. Okay, you come here and hold that. And
Bereit zum Ausrücken. Achtung! Ausrücken! Ausrücken! Zuhören!
well, if we haven't been, well, they've took down most of these guys over here, but we've definitely been helping out by our offenses here, here. It's going to stop them from reinforcing these guys, hopefully. Oh, come on, keep up your pressure. Don't let them off. Fuel storage, very good. Okay. Now we're going to move down synthetic oil experiments. Okay, now that we have some forces down here, will you attack out to that? No, you can't, because there's still enough enemy sea operations keeping us from going across the straits, I presume. Okay, you attack there, and you guys attack here. You pin them there, and you push. Oh, goody, we're here. Okay, push across the sea, or the river, not the sea. And you guys come down out of those mountains and push on them there. Come down to here. And more factories, which... Well, I think light tanks.
Ausrücken! Befehle? Zuhören!
Pushed into there already. Very good. Cut them off.
Ihre Befehle? Ausrücken! Bereit! Ausrücken! Zuhören!
Pin them, pin them, pin them. Don't let them...
Bereit zum Ausrücken!
Support that attack. There we go, now we got those guys cut off.
Ihre Befehle? Ausrücken!
4 divisions cut off. They're alone. You support that, cut off even more divisions. Okay, well, I think we're going to end this episode. I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks for liking the videos if you have. And of course, please post questions, comments, tips, suggestions. Love to hear your thoughts, either about some of our topics or just about Kaiserreich and what we're doing here. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.